That's okay, you'll get the basic shape of it. This morning, generally in mornings, we're going to be looking at the Anapanasati Sutta, and mainly we're going to be doing that in sitting practice. But I'll say a little bit about it. Recently been studying some of the Buddha's texts around Kalyanamitrata, and it's quite interesting, this whole, that if you know any quotes from the Pali Canon, one of the quotes that you're going to know is about Ananda saying to the Buddha that spiritual friendship is half of the spiritual life, and the Buddha correcting him and saying it's the whole of the spiritual life. We were looking at some of the sutta that comes from, and also the sutta that some of the other suttas around Kalyanamitrata. And one of the things that you get from it, or one of the things that I got from it, is that what can sometimes seem like quite a codified and quite a systematized communication of the Dharma actually has its roots in something much simpler and in a way much more human. And you can read the Satipatthana Sutta, and we're about to go through a 16-stage meditation or a 16-stage meditation instruction. And again, it can seem like something quite systematic and something quite codified. But one of the points that the Buddha makes in some of these texts on Kalyanamitrata is that at the core of any Dharma teaching, it's the Buddha speaking to specific people and trying to give a bit of a flavor of what his experience is like. You get this whole drama after the Enlightenment where the Buddha's not sure whether or not he can communicate, whether or not he can teach. And there's this very sort of dramatic little story where he walks to Sarnath, he's speaking to the 5 ascetics that he used to hang out with. And there's this moment where one of the 5 ascetics understands what the Buddha's getting at. The little verse in the sutta is, Kondanya knows, Kondanya understands. And you just get the sense of how important it was to the Buddha. And I think to sort of bring the systematizations down to something a bit simpler, a bit more human. You've got this experience of enlightenment. The Buddha took 7 weeks to absorb what had happened. And his first instinct is to want to communicate it. There's this whole drama where he's not sure he can communicate it. It's this unprecedented experience in human culture, in human history, certainly from a Buddhist point of view. And he really wonders if he can find a language to communicate something so subtle. And that first exchange with Kondanya is him finding out if this experience can be passed on. So you get this simple human communication of somebody who's just had an experience of, again, to use the traditional language, enlightenment, awakening, liberation. There's no precedent for how it's communicated. So it's the Buddha exploring how to articulate what his experience is like in a way that can make sense to other people, and especially in a way that gives other people access to that experience. And somebody, Sangharakshita, described the Dharma as the sum total of efforts to communicate that experience of liberation, that experience of enlightenment by the Buddha and his disciples in a way that gives us access to it. So that the crucial thing about any Buddhist teaching is this attempt to articulate something in a way that gives us an experiential sense of what it is that we're coming into relationship with, and an experiential sense of what the Buddha's experience is like. So this is the Buddha describing the practice of mindfulness of breathing, but the intention is to describe it in a way that gives us a bit of a sense of what that experience is like and why it's so significant. I think when I was reading Pali Suttas, I would quite often skip the intro. Like the intro quite often is the setting of the scene, who the Buddha was talking to, where the Buddha was sort of talking and so on. And I jumped to the meaty bit of the teaching. But actually, latterly, I've got more of an appreciation of those moments of setup, because I think very often who the Buddha's talking to and the context that he's talking in shape the content of the communication. Again, you get this sense of the teaching not being primarily an abstract teaching, like it's a specific communication about a specific experience to a specific audience. And sometimes we're going to hear teachings that really speak to us. And other times we hear teachings that probably will never speak to us, because the person that the Buddha was talking to, the character of the person the Buddha was talking to, are just different enough from our experience for us to not resonate with them in the same way. So again, just coming back to this sense that we're looking at an exchange of human experience first and foremost. The setup here, it's a nice little story, I think. It's the Buddha staying at Savatthi in the Eastern Park in the palace of Megara's mother, together with very well-known elder disciples. I always think it's sort of interesting. I'll give you a little bit of a roll call. We've got Maha Modgalyana, Maha Kashyapa, Maha Kachana, Maha Kohita, Maha Kapina, the Venerable Maha Kunda, and so on. And all of these guys are arahants. So this is some of the most experienced of the Buddha's disciples. And it describes a situation where they're all teaching. So you've got this group of bhikkhus, this group of practitioners, some very experienced practitioners. They're teaching their students. And there's this lovely little line in the sutta where, in verse 4, the Buddha is sort of looking around and he says, "Bhikkhus, I am content with this. My mind is content, my heart is content with this progress." And looking at this group of very experienced practitioners, he decides to give a teaching. So he lets everybody know that he's going to stay until the next full moon. And at the next full moon, he'll give a teaching. So a lot of the bhikkhus who are there, a lot of the bhikkhus who are around the Buddha, go off in all directions. They pass the word that the Buddha's about to give a teaching, and people start to congregate to hear this teaching. And the teaching that the Buddha has chosen to give is the Anapanasati Sutta, the teaching on mindfulness of breathing. And again, you get this lovely little context that at the start of the sutta, the Buddha looks around and he said, "In this Sangha, there are bhikkhus who abide devoted to the development of loving kindness, of compassion, of altruistic joy, of equanimity, on the perception of impermanence. Such Buddhas are here in this Sangha of bhikkhus. Such bhikkhus are here in this Sangha of bhikkhus." And then he says, "In this Sangha of bhikkhus, there are bhikkhus who abide devoted to the development of mindfulness of breathing." And again, I wanted to say just a word or two about the context. So there's already people practicing the mindfulness of breathing. And they're practicing in a context, they're practicing the Brahmaviharas, they're practicing reflection on impermanence and so on. And I think just this idea that mindfulness of breathing and mindfulness generally is in a broader context of practice. You've got the bhikkhus practicing the Brahmaviharas, reflecting on impermanence, reflecting on the decomposition of a corpse, and so on. And all of those practices together sort of support different aspects of our own psyche, like our senses, our feeling dimension, our capacity to understand. All of those are being sort of spoken to by different dimensions of the teaching. And the mindfulness of breathing happens within that broader context of practice. And I suppose I wanted to mention that just because there's been so much emphasis in our system of practice in the last few years. I wanted just to say what a traditional approach that is, that there's a nice little one-liner from Christopher Titmuss, who was teaching something around mindfulness. Titmuss is out of this tradition that really puts a lot of weight on the Satipatthana Sutta, but he was kind of cautioning against reading it in too narrow a way. He said to listen to some Western Buddhist teachers and their emphasis on mindfulness, you would think the Buddha had taught the Noble One-Fold Path. So mindfulness is centrally important, but it happens in a mandala of practice. It's very rich context. Second thing that I wanted to mention just before we go on to the 16 stages is this idea that there are already people who are practicing the development of mindfulness of breathing. So before the Buddha gives this 16-stage teaching, it's already being practiced. And there are a couple of suttas where the Buddha is talking to bhikkhus about how they practice the mindfulness of breathing. And one of the striking things about it is that they're all describing doing it in different ways. And the Buddha is basically saying, that sounds okay. That sounds like that would work. And then quite often in that context, he'll give the unpacking of the 16-stage teaching. But I think there's something in there about, again, it's one way of describing the practice. It's worth taking seriously. It's the Buddha from the experience of enlightenment describing how he does it. So there's definitely stuff that we can learn from it. But again, it's not this sort of rigid, systematic march through a structure. It's something much more living than that, and much more flexible than that. And it's not the only way into the mindfulness of breathing. It's a helpful way. It's a very rich framework, I think, but it's a tool to be used to support our own deepening experience rather than something that we have to kind of conform to. It's suggestive, it's practical, it's precise, but use it to the extent that it actually supports a deeper engagement with the practice. So that's by way of setting the scene, setting the context. So the Buddha goes on in sort of verse 15 of the text that I've sent round. The Buddha then starts to go on to the practice itself. And the setup for the practice is that the Buddha says, when mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it's of great fruit and great benefit. The first point. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it fulfills the four foundations of mindfulness. So this is the link, or the explicit link, between the Anapanasati Sutta and the Satipatthana Sutta. Satipatthana Sutta is explicitly about these four dimensions of experience. And Bante's comment on the Satipatthana Sutta is that the practice is concerned with taking mindfulness and positivity into the whole spectrum of our experience. So that the four foundations, the four establishments of mindfulness are that the body, feelings, how we feel, the mind, the quality of our awareness, what the mind does with how we feel, and then this deeper looking into the nature of things, the sort of the real kind of nature of our experience when we attend to it most deeply. So they're the four foundations of mindfulness: body, feelings, mind, and dhammas. And the Anapanasati Sutta takes awareness through each of those four. You've got a single attention to the breath, and then the breath, the awareness grounded in the breath, moving into experience of the body, moving into experience of how we feel. starting to notice what the mind does, and then out of that clearer quality of experience, looking more deeply into the nature of things, nature of our mind, nature of our experience. So it's a beautifully sort of simple structure that just takes us more and more deeply into that whole spectrum of experience. The Buddha goes on to say, when the 4 foundations of mindfulness are developed and cultivated, they fulfill the 7 enlightenment factors. So again, it's starting to get a bit kind of systematized. That the 7 enlightenment factors, 7 factors of awakening, are how the Anapanasati Sutta finishes, and also how the Satipatthana Sutta finishes. You get this little list of the enlightening factors of awakening. And what's being said here is that as you take awareness into these different dimensions of experience, what happens is we set in motion an unfolding process of the mind freeing itself. They're called awakening factors because they describe the main qualities, the main kind of stepping stones of a gradual process of liberation. So what's being said here is that as you take awareness into those different dimensions of experience, we gradually shift the momentum of our experience from being caught in habit into a process of awakening. So as the Buddha says here, mindfulness of breathing fulfills the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and the 4 foundations of mindfulness, developed and cultivated, fulfill the 7 enlightenment factors. And the 7 enlightenment factors, developed and cultivated, fulfill true knowledge and deliverance. So we're dealing with a practice that starts off as simple as it can get. You just start to attend to the breath. But as you engage with that more and more deeply, we're setting in motion a process, a momentum, that if we cultivate and develop, and this practice gives you the tools to cultivate and develop it, you're setting up the conditions for the process of awakening and for true knowledge and deliverance. And one of the things that's beautiful about the practice, you're looking at elements of true knowledge and deliverance that are quite easily accessible. One of the things that we'll do in the practice is just you're attending to the breath arising and the breath passing. You're watching something come into being, you're watching it fade. And there's something about attending to that process of arising, that process of falling, and our capacity to be available to that, completely alive and responsive to that, that gives us a clue about the nature of one of the central aspects of the experience of awakening. So it's both quite a profound practice and a very accessible practice. And Anapanasati just takes you through it step by step, what that deepening experience looks like, how each stage supports the stage that follows. One more little bit of setup. So the Buddha says, a bhikkhu goes to the forest or the root of a tree or to an empty hut, sits down, and having folded one's legs crosswise, sets one's body erect and establishes mindfulness in front of him. And then ever mindful one breathes in and mindful one breathes out. So before going on to the practice itself, I just wanted to say something about even that simple little setup. So the bhikkhu has gone to the forest or to the root of a tree. I was speaking to the Stroud group a week or two ago, and just talking about a recent conversation I'd had with an order member called Paramananda. And in the conversation with Paramananda, he was putting a lot of emphasis on the metaphor of the tree in the Buddhist tradition. You get trees in all of the kind of key moments of the Buddha's biography. The Buddha's born under a tree. He's enlightened under a tree. He dies under a tree. One of the points that Padmananda was making is that this image of the tree, you've got roots going deep into the earth and branches opening up to the sky. And you get that quality very, very explicitly all the way through Mindfulness of Breathing and the Satipatthana Sutta, that they end up somewhere very profound and very subtle, but they're completely grounded, completely embodied. So you get this wonderful integration of the absolutely ordinary with the very profound. And this image of the tree where you've got the branches opening up to the sky, but grounded and rooted and burrowing deep into experience. And all of the way through the Satipatthana Sutta and the Anapanasati Sutta, you've got that motion of connecting to experience and then creating space around it. And each is as important as the other. You're connected, but you're not caught. You're free, but you're not disconnected. There's this quality of rootedness, this quality of groundedness, and an openness, a spaciousness, a deeper seeing that runs through the whole sutta as a flavor. So the Buddha's setting that up. You've gone somewhere secluded. Practical implication of that is for the duration of this retreat, with all of the usual stuff of our lives going on round about us, a bit more than it usually would on retreat, what we're going to try and do is at least a couple of times a day, just attend to the quality of our experience. So just all of the other pulls on our attention for 30 minutes or 40 minutes at a time. We can just put them to one side. We're in our own metaphorical forest and just sort of withdrawing a little bit from those demands on our attention so the awareness can go a little bit deeper. Body erect, one sets one's body erect, one's leg crosswise. Again, you're just looking in your experience of the body, what you're trying to create as a quality of awareness too. There's something in this thing, I think, again, quoting Padmananda, he was saying the kind of cultural model is that it's the brain that attends, it's the brain that has the awareness. The Anapanasati and Satipatthana Suttas put a lot of emphasis on the body, and just this very simple thing, it's almost like it's the whole body that knows. So it's not the mind attending to experience, it's us connecting to a kind of embodied intelligence. We feel the breath in the body, we feel the feelings in the body, we almost feel the mental states, at least connected with the body. So there's that sense of rooted in our own body. And then this question of bringing mindfulness to the fore. And maybe if I can just one last point, that this flavor of mindfulness sort of runs all the way through the practice. And Analio, I think, describes it as a sort of receptive awareness to experience as it is. So at the start of the practice, we're just setting up the kind of intuitive feel that we've already got for that quality of kind of present, receptive attention to our experience. But in the sutta, that's not the only instruction. In the sutta, you're asked to concentrate, you're asked to contemplate, you're asked to look, you're asked to know, you're asked to calm. There's a whole set of activities. Sati actually hardly gets a mention in either the Anapanasati Sutta or the Satipatthana Sutta. Sati is not the main instruction. So sati is a sort of quality that comes from the more specific instructions that we're asked to follow in the practice itself, but it's there as a context. So right at the start of the practice, we're bringing this receptive awareness to our experience. And then within that receptive awareness, we're starting to attend to certain aspects of our experience. And that's more than enough by way of setup. So just to kind of segue into a bit of sitting practice, what you're asked to do in the mindfulness of breathing, obviously, is to begin with attend to the breath. So that the first two instructions are like this. While breathing, one knows I'm breathing in long. While breathing, one knows I'm breathing short. So that the first instruction is just starting to notice what the breath is like. And long and short probably stand for something a little kind of bigger than that. You're starting to become aware, we're kind of moving from distractedness to starting to connect to the experience itself, and an interest in, a curiosity about the natural unfolding, living experience of the body breathing. And it's a transferable skill, that the quality of attention, the quality of connection that we're making with the breath carries on all the way through the practice. So at the beginning of this, we're just learning how to connect to and attend to direct living experience. So you're just noticing, was that a long breath or was that a short breath? One of the things that you sometimes get in practice is, as the awareness goes deeper, the breath can become subtler and become a little more still. It's not mechanical by any matter of means, but as the breath becomes subtler, the awareness becomes subtler. As the awareness becomes subtler, the breath becomes subtler. So you just got this feedback loop that allows the awareness to become a little more still, a little more subtle as you go more deeply into the practice. So maybe this long and short has something of that suggestion about it, that the awareness and the breath both become a little more refined and a little more subtle. But the basic instruction is just be alive to what's happening. You're not trying to manipulate it. You're not trying to make it go in any particular way. You're just noticing, am I breathing in long or am I breathing in short? Am I breathing out long? Am I breathing out short? Just what's the quality of the breath? And then the sutta moves to, this is familiar ground. This is the mindfulness of breathing practice that we do all the time. The awareness shifts to the sensations of the breath and the body. So the third verse is sensitive to the whole body. I breathe in, I breathe out. And that's preceded by a little verse that says, one trains oneself. So this is a skill that we're learning. We're learning how to move out of confusion, distraction, into attention and connection. But it's a training. It's something that we gradually learn how to become more and more familiar with. So one trains oneself, sensitive to the whole body. I breathe in, I breathe out. And then a fourth verse, one trains oneself, calming the whole body. I breathe in, I breathe out. And this is quite a mysterious thing, I think. As you take awareness into the breath, it tends to become subtler. As you take awareness into the body's grateful, right? It's a delight to actually connect to our own experience. And as you do that, it's almost like you create a space that the body can relax and release into. So again, this idea of a practice of sort of natural unfolding, you're just starting to notice a quality of calming that arises naturally from paying attention to experience. And I want to make a wee bit of a point about this, because this carries on all the way through the practice. As you become aware of feelings, you create a space around them that allows them to relax and release. As we become aware of mental states, we create a space around them that allows them to relax and release. As you become aware of all the phenomena of experience, we create a space around them that allows them to relax and release, or allows a relationship to them to go from clinging to relaxing and releasing. But you get the first hint of it very simply in this verse of calming the whole body. I breathe in, I breathe out. Just noticing what the body naturally does as we take awareness into it. So there you go. That's the start of this Anapanasati Sutta and the Buddha's instruction about how we might take awareness into our experience. Not done a lot of stuff on Zoom. Don't know what that was like to listen to. Do you feel okay to go into the meditation straight away, or do you want a 5-minute breather? So first of all, thumbs up if straight into the meditation would be okay. And thumbs up if a 5-minute breather would be attractive. Okay, so I've got no idea what screen 2 and screen 3 think, but screen 1 have just decided that we're all about to go into the meditation. So let's just settle down a little bit. If you want to take a minute or two to make yourself comfortable and set yourself up for meditation, we're going to do the psychic equivalent of going to the forest, finding the root of a tree. I'll give you a minute or two just to find your own seat and to settle and connect to yourself. Just following that introductory verse, this idea that we're going to a secluded place. Again, just making it clear in our own minds that for the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to just attend to the meditation, attend to the quality of our awareness. The various demands on our attention can wait for 30 minutes. in the instructions, just becoming aware of our body. Sitting cross-legged or sitting however we choose to sit in a way that gives us a firm foundation. And just having that sense of rootedness. Sense of connection to our seat. Sense of connection to the ground. That sense of solidness and stability of the ground. Sense that we're supported by it. Then this instruction to be aware of the whole body, just this sense of the body rising up from the cushion. It's taking your awareness quite carefully through the whole body. Starting with our contact with the ground, working up the spine, working through the whole body. Just that sense of the body naturally upright and relaxed. Then the instruction to bring mindfulness to the fore. Just get a sense of what's it like to be a bit more mindful as we're sitting here. What does mindfulness feel like? It's the sort of texture, the flavour. Being a bit more receptively aware of our experience. And with that quality of connection to our body. Just becoming aware of the next breath. Aware of the breath as an experience in our body. Aware of it, what it's like to feel the body breathing. What we're looking for is quality of interest, quality of curiosity about what the breath is actually like. What is it that gives us access to that as an experience? It's helpful, maybe attending to where the experience of the breath is strongest, most distinct. And this question of, was that a long breath or was that a short breath? Noticing if we're able to stay with the whole breath. Is it possible to be present at the arising of the breath? And stay connected through the duration of the breath. Still be present at the end of the breath. Just becoming sensitive to the natural process of the breathing. Not trying to breathe in any particular way, but just interested and curious about what happens naturally. What's the experience that tells us what this specific breath is like? Breathing a long breath. I know I'm breathing a long breath. Breathing a short breath. I know I'm breathing a short breath. Then in the third stage, we gradually broaden the awareness out. We're aware of what the breath feels like in the whole body. So the awareness of the body comes into the foreground a bit more. We stay connected to the breath, but the awareness of the breath a bit more in the background. Sensitive to the whole body. I breathe in, I breathe out. Noticing what the breath feels like in our nose, throat. What happens in our chest, in our belly, when we breathe in and breathe out. Having a sense of the whole body breathing. Even trying to have a sense of some of the subtler dimensions of experience. Breath fills our lungs. Blood carries the breath to every cell in the body. Perhaps even including a sense of the energy, the vitality of the body. And finally, just noticing that as we take awareness into the breath, into the body like that, just being alive to any experience of calm that's naturally arising. Be something quite subtle. Maybe the breath is a little subtler. Maybe the mind's a little more settled. What happens in our body when we connect to it a bit more fully? Notice any experience of relaxing, any experience of calming. Just notice that taking awareness to it can strengthen it, can let it become a stronger current in our experience. We can support that natural process of calming Just noticing anywhere in the body that feels tight, that feels held. Noticing some of these deep habits of how we tighten around our experience. If it's helpful, just having a sense of breathing in to those areas of tightness, those areas of tension. And on the out breath, sense of relaxing, sense of letting go. Calming the whole body. I breathe in, I breathe out. Bringing our attention back into the room. I'm looking at a screen full of people who all look beautifully still, beautifully composed. I feel just like the Buddha looking out at that field of bhikkhus and taking pleasure in it. So let's have a break for 10 minutes and we'll come back and do a short just sitting. And if you're kind of continuity of awareness, don't have to force anything, but just that kind of natural sense of connection to the breath, to the body, even to that sense of calm to the extent that we can touch into it. So break for 10 minutes and at 15:15 we'll do a short unled meditation just to finish.